When you search the internet or use AI, do you want it to agree with you, or are you open to having your mind changed? Welcome to the Chicago Booth Review podcast, where we bring you groundbreaking academic research in a clear and straightforward way. I'm Hal Weitzman. Today, Chicago Booth's Oleg Urminsky tells us about his research, which suggests that we often search in a narrow way that ends up giving us results that confirm our views. Should search engines instead aim to open us up to opposing opinions? Oleg Urminsky, welcome to the Chicago Booth Review podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, we're delighted to have you to talk about searching on the internet, something that we all do, and we're talking about the narrow search effect, which I think is also something that we probably all do. Tell us, what is the narrow search effect, and what does it mean for those of us who spend all our days either on Google or ChatGPT?
So the idea is very simple, that kind of we come to, anytime we're searching for information, we come to that question with some preconceptions, beliefs, attitudes, and without necessarily intending to, those get reflected in how we kind of frame the question we ask, right? So if I think that caffeine is good for you, but I want to understand more about the health effects of caffeine, when I go into Google, I'm more likely to frame that in a positive way. And if I think caffeine's bad for you and something you should avoid, I'm more likely to search for what are those bad things.
What are the negative effects of?
Exactly.
Versus what are the positive effects of. What I love about this research is, we hear so much about how the algorithm is evil and it's telling us to do terrible things or confirming our views of terrible things, but we don't really think about how we are, shaping the responses, sort of our inputs. We tend to think a lot about, we'll blame the machine rather than thinking about ourselves and how we interact with the machine. Go ahead, talk about that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's a general issue in lots of technology, that the technology is designed to try to be helpful to us and around our needs, but often it takes kind of a simple view of what those needs are and leaves out some of the needs. So Google was designed around this proposition that they could basically deliver two things, right? One is identify among all the stuff on the internet, the stuff that's the most relevant, and then also do some quality control. So if there's something that seems really relevant through keyword matching, but other people aren't linking to it, maybe that's lower quality, less useful information. And so Google's proposition from the beginning was, we're going to show you the most relevant stuff with some vetting for quality. And that's super useful, but it leaves out some of how we interact with these tools.
Right. Okay. So when we think about polarization, for example, which is a human thing, the machines haven't necessarily caused polarization, right. But we're at a stage now where people often disagree about what the basic facts of what's happening are. So even the sort of old journalistic motto of just stick to the facts is hard to do because it's not clear what the facts are. So how, in that example, kind of what's the interaction between user behavior and this search engine optimization? How does that exacerbate something like polarization?
Yeah, so I think the scenario you sketched out where we're even a little unclear on what the facts are is exactly the situation where this kind of matters the most, because I think traditionally we've thought of the cure for that situation as like, okay, well, everyone should kind of have their say on how they view the facts, and then we'll have a society-wide conversation and kind of figure it out together. And when that conversation is happening on the internet, there's a question of like, okay, but which slice of that conversation are you going to see? And so again, if I'm framing my request in a way that is in line with kind of my prior beliefs, and then if the search engine or other kind of information technology is really optimizing on that relevance, then it's going to take the slice of that conversation that it sees as most relevant and show it to me. But that can be the slice that's kind of most confirming of what I already believed.
Right, and we've all had that experience, right, of saying, should I start an afternoon tea shop or whatever, put into ChatGPT, and it says, yes, that's a great idea, perfect thing to do at your stage of life. Of course, it's a terrible idea. And we've heard much more dangerous, nefarious examples. We've heard about echo chambers, filter bubbles. Is your narrow search effect different from those? Is it contradict those? Is it complementary to those?
It's very complementary. So the idea of the filter bubble is that if the technology platform is doing kind of algorithmic personalization, as it learns more about you without you even asking it to, it's going to choose the things that it predicts are kind of most relevant to your interests. And so that can create this situation where you're only seeing a slice of what's out there. And then the echo chamber is the same idea when you're choosing who you're getting information from. So on social media, who do you choose to follow? That's going to shape the information environment you're in. And so this is complementary in kind of a third way in which you might only be seeing a part of what's out there or disproportionately be exposed to a part of what's out there, which is just the framing of the query, just the questions you ask. The search query on Google, the question that you pose to ChatGPT, again, can kind of narrow that set of information you're being shown.
Okay, and so in my example where I asked ChatGPT, should I give up my job and start a tea shop, is it sensing something about that query that says, yes, Hal needs a change in career or needs a break or loves tea or whatever, and so that would be a great idea for him, but objectively that's a crazy idea? I mean, what cues is it taking? Do you know?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the things that's particularly interesting about kind of LLM-based technology being used as an information source is that these are prediction machines. Like, the LLM doesn't know if it's a good idea or a bad idea to start a tea shop. There's information out there on the internet and other sources that it's been trained on that has relevant parts of the answer, but it's not in the business of making evaluations. What it's in the business of doing is predicting, right? Predicting what kind of text would be a good fit to this conversation. That's kind of the core LLM technology. And then there's a layer on top of that, which is the kind of reinforcement learning human factors training, which says, like, there are a bunch of things that seem like a continuation of this conversation that I could say next. Which one do people like? Which one do people give a thumbs up to, right? And so either because the kind of information, let's say on the internet, that starts off with that kind of question tends to then answer in the positive, right? Or because when the LLM is generating its responses, people prefer the more positive, upbeat responses. It's going to do what people, right, what is predicted to be a good continuation to the conversation and what people want to hear. And then if you ask it for kind of, give me 5 reasons why I'm going to lose my retirement savings if I start a tea shop. First of all, that's content that appears on totally different kinds of web pages, right? So it's kind of navigating this enormous information space, it's going to find itself in a different corner of the internet where different texts would be predicted to come next. Plus, in this kind of reinforcement learning training, the situations in which it gets posed that kind of question, it's going to get a more positive people will kind of like the negative information more because that's what they're looking for.
Right. But if this is a problem, and what your research is highlighting is that it's not a problem with the algorithm per se, it's a problem with how I use it and with the terms that I put in, shouldn't I just make my terms broader? Then it will be more useful a tool?
Yeah, so we could think about kind of addressing this in 2 ways. One way is to kind of make people aware, right? That people should be kind of better calibrated in using these tools. And in our studies, we played with that a little bit. And there are limitations in how we were able to test it, but it didn't seem to work very well. Instead, what we found a stronger effect of is just kind of changing the behavior of the platform, right? And this is something that if you talk about it in terms of Google, you get a lot of reactions that are like, just give the answer, right? Why are you trying to change Google? Because it's at least seemed to users pretty constant over time, although they're constantly making changes in the background. It creates this sense that there's kind of one right answer. One interesting thing with kind of AI chatbots and LLM technology is we're seeing these new versions coming out, and then one version comes out and people are like, it's too sycophantic and it just agrees with whatever I say. And then OpenAI says, got it, we'll change it, right? And so we have more of an intuition that this is kind of a fluid tool that can be designed in different ways. And so I think there's a little more openness now to kind of asking the question of like, oh, okay, there are decisions in how to configure and train these things. We should think through those decisions. And that's kind of the spirit of our paper, is to say, you can design these tools to give you kind of narrow answers, optimizing on relevance, or you can design the tool to give you a broader set of answers and say, let me give you a bunch of information, some that's optimized on relevance, because most of the time that's what you're going to want, but then let's supplement that with some additional information that we're not choosing kind of the second most relevant thing, but instead we're trying to kind of span the space of potentially relevant information to help the user be better oriented about kind of what is the full range of information out there on this topic.
I'm just wondering, though, that hearing you speak, that we there's sort of an assumption underlying all of this, which is the internet should be true. It should,
Exactly.
The Google should be the oracle. It should give us the answer to the meaning of life, and the same with ChatGPT. It should be true. And so we, rather than it behaving as it's supposed to behave and giving, as you say, kind of a probable answer, we think, oh, it's wrong. It's hallucinating. It's making a mistake. And maybe you could say, well, these are tools, and it's like if you read the op-ed page of the Wall Street Journal, you would not say it's true. It's opinion. These are opinions. They're based on certain facts, but there are other facts that might lead you to different opinions. So maybe the problem is not with the machine, but with the way that we use the machine. That's all I'm wondering.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're in this time of rapid change in terms of like AI technology, and we have some conflicting intuitions about what the benefits of AI are. And some of the ways that we talk about AI, particularly when we're talking about kind of AI risk, is like, what if it becomes super smart, right? And I think that can create a perception among the general public sometimes that like, oh, it can figure out the truth better than we can. That's actually not what it's good at, unless it's specifically designed with particular parameters. So if there's kind of a system of rules, it can analyze that very effectively, often better than humans. But in the much more kind of fluid AI chatbot world, what it's really doing is predicting like what would be a good continuation to this conversation.
Oleg Urminsky, in the first half we talked about your narrow search effect that you found when people put in inputs. Sure enough, they get the kind of narrow responses that reflect their narrow questions. You talk about directionally narrow search terms. What makes a search directionally narrow as opposed to a broad search?
Absolutely. So the directional part of the narrow search is this idea that there's kind of a preconception in some direction, right? So if I ask for, what is the height of the Eiffel Tower, and then Google comes back and just gives me literally that height with no other information, that's a very narrow search result, but that's great because I was asking a very specific question and it answered exactly that question. When we think about like what are the health effects of some common food, right? If I ask questions that are framed in positive or negative terms, and then the response I get kind of overemphasizes relative to what the full picture is, either the positive or negative direction that I asked about, that's what we mean by kind of directionally narrow.
Okay, so give us some examples, because in your research you studied searches, exactly as you say, for information on the health effects of food and drinks, and you asked participants about their motivations when they were making these searches. So what did you find out there? Were they trying to confirm something they already believe, or were they just looking for a quote-unquote objective response?
Yeah, so one risk in any kind of research where you're trying to kind of understand the intersection of psychology and technology is understanding people's goals. And there are things that we could say that like, okay, we've decided a priori that this kind of outcome is better, and the technology doesn't lead to that outcome, so that means the technology is bad. And that would be a mistake because we're assuming that what we're calling the better outcome is what the user actually wants, right? And so we're ascribing kind of a user, if it is a problem, we're ascribing a user problem to the technology. And so one of the things we looked into in our studies is maybe when people go to Google, they're looking to win an argument with a friend, right? And so you think caffeine's good for you, I think caffeine's bad for you, and we've debated last week, and I want to arm with some new facts to go out there and win the argument the next time we talk, right? And if that was the case, then what we're calling this kind of negative consequence, this lack of belief updating that happens from narrow search, is actually not a problem. It is my goal, right? And so we asked people what their goals were. We did choose a set of topics where we thought the goals were more likely to be kind of people just wanting to be fully informed. And I think if you ask questions about like hot button political issues, the answers would be quite different.
Right.
But the results kind of confirmed that when people were searching for information about, health effects of caffeine on the internet, they weren't looking to have their views reinforced. They were looking to kind of have a better understanding, and that makes kind of the lack of belief updating due to narrow search, that gives us some confidence in kind of calling that a problem.
So just talk through that example. If I type in what are the health effects, I'm keeping it quite bland, the health effects of caffeine, what did you find tends to come up? And by the way, when you talk about Google, you're talking about the Google, not the AI version of Google, is that right?
Yes. Yeah. So this paper actually started out years ago as a search engine paper. And just when we were kind of felt that we fully understood what was going on with search engines, like the world dramatically changed. So we're like, all right, we need to broaden our scope. But it created interesting opportunities to kind of compare traditional search with these new AI-based information tools. And we find quite parallel results with both. So what would happen on Google is you'd get a bunch of web pages that talk about the health benefits of caffeine. And if you search for health risks of caffeine, you would get a bunch of different pages. In one kind of amusing thing we noticed is sometimes from the same website, just a different page on the same website, because the website is just trying to create whatever information people want to see, right? But you would get this slanted view. And so it would mostly be information about health benefits if that's what you search for. Some of the sites might acknowledge that there are some risks and vice versa. But kind of the overwhelming perspective you'd get is like, okay, so it's mostly benefits.
Okay, but that's if I put in what are the benefits of caffeine. And if I put in what are the risks, I get the negative. But I'm asking, what if I put in what are the health effects of caffeine?
Right, so if you put in what are the health effects, you get kind of a mix, right?
Okay.
And if you put in what are the health benefits and risks, you again get a mix. So it's not that the technology is kind of preventing us in most cases from getting a balanced view. It's that when the kind of information on the internet evolves in such a way that there are these kind of different pockets of information that don't overlap very much, for example, because different organizations or different websites focus on different things, that's when we can get this effect that kind of the framing of the question you ask steers you to one of those pockets of information.
So you said that sometimes it's conscious, you and I are having a debate about caffeine, and I say it's bad for you, and you say it's good for you, and so I just want to get some ammunition. But in the case where I genuinely want to understand what the health effects do people tend to phrase it as risks or benefits? Like what in other words, I asked you, was that intentional, that narrowness, or was it unintentional?
So we're building on kind of a classic literature in psychology that looks in the context of conversation between people, that finds that people tend to ask questions of other people that reflect kind of their preconceptions and biases, right? And it's not that they always do it. And it may even be for some topics that the most common would be a balanced search term. But the ones who don't ask it in a balanced way tend to ask it in a way that reflects their preconceptions.
Okay, so in which case we're going to get the responses that we want.
Exactly.
Right, okay. So, but you did find in one of your studies, when you, as you say, you broadened it out to include ChatGPT, that in one of your studies you got ChatGPT to acknowledge that there was a opposing viewpoint, right? But nevertheless, the people's beliefs afterwards didn't really reflect that doubt. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so the AI setting is really interesting because it's quite different, right? If you search on Google, you just get a list of web pages. You choose which ones to click through. whereas AI in some ways feels a lot more like a conversation. And in particular, ChatGPT gives you, unless you instruct it otherwise, it'll give you a fairly lengthy response to these kinds of queries, right? It'll give you a couple paragraphs. What we found is, and I think this is kind of a design choice on the part of OpenAI, is it'll tend to kind of answer your question in maybe 3 paragraphs with details, and then at the end say, but of course there is the other thing, whatever that is, right? So if you ask about health benefits, it'll say, these are the things that have been viewed as potential health benefits of caffeine. However, of course, it is possible to have too much caffeine, and you should, there's guidance you can get on how much caffeine is too much caffeine. And if you ask about health risks, it'll say, oh, there's all these potential problems with caffeine. However, for most people, consumption of a modest amount of caffeine is fine, right? And so it's very much framed as kind of a caveat. And so that we thought was a really interesting question, which is it enough just to acknowledge that there's more there? Or is it really that people are kind of processing the relative weight of the evidence they're being exposed to? And our results suggest that, adding a little caveat at the end is not enough.
Right.
Right. It really is like, you've told me so
like
much
the small
information.
print on the drugs that say,
Exactly.
may cause death or whatever. It's not.
Right.
It's not really going to put you off.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and then you replicated this again using Bing, which not many people do. So you added to the Bing users, and this was AI assisted. So this is kind of the in between, right? So tell us what happened there, because I know that Bing sometimes attempts to kind of reformulate these narrow queries into broader ones. So
so that was a really interesting thing. So Bing was the first search engine that tried to incorporate AI into search, and in a way that actually turned out not to be the direction that most of kind of AI-assisted search has gone. Now, the model that most are following is to have like an AI summary before the search results. But what Bing was doing was trying to kind of improve the search process and give some summary information, but the focus was on giving you search results. And what was very nice about how they initially set it up is quite transparent about what it was doing. And so we would type in our directionally slanted search terms that we wanted to test, and we saw that in some cases it would reformulate it into a balanced query. And this is something actually we've been interested in following up on, which is another way to think about the role of AI is it enables kind of at scale taking questions that are directionally slanted and creating the more balanced version of the question. But we would ask why is nuclear energy dangerous? And Bing would reformulate it into what are the risks and benefits of nuclear energy? And then show us the results for that, right? And so we saw that in those topics where Bing reformulated it into a balanced search, then we no longer saw this kind of narrow search effect.
Okay, and you actually you modified it, I think, your own custom designed search engine, right, to get these broader results like the ones you're talking about. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so some of our studies were just having people interact with Google or see ChatGPT output, and kind of towards the end of the project, we wanted to kind of go deeper into the guts of how these things worked. And so what we did is we designed a search engine that used the Google API, but kind of without the user's awareness, changed the search terms for some people into more balanced search. And then with ChatGPT, we created kind of short answer chatbots where we took their query but wrapped instructions to ChatGPT around it. In one case saying, give a narrow answer specifically to the question that's being asked. In the other one, we said, give a broad answer that takes into account, other relevant information, different points of view. And so importantly, the user didn't know that this was happening, right? And I think this kind of parallels what is already happening and likely will be happening even more, which is that kind of different AI information tools will be customizing some of this behind the scenes, and then people will choose in the marketplace between which ones they find more useful, which ones they like better.
I see. So I could get one that's going to challenge me a little bit more.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what we saw is that when we kind of customized the AI chatbot so that it gave broader answers, there was more belief updating.
Okay, and by belief update, you mean people are just more open to having their minds changed, or have
Exactly.
or open to more different kinds of information than exactly what they were looking for. And presumably, you think that's a good thing.
We think so.
Right.
I mean, with an important caveat, which is kind of broadening search or information provision more generally is beneficial to the degree that kind of the information pool that it's drawing from is of equal quality, right? So if someone is searching for, like, where was Obama born, and broadening search means you're going to start scooping up some conspiracy theory websites about Obama claiming that Obama was born in Kenya, then we're actually degrading the information that's being shown to people.
Yeah, because you said at the beginning that the search engine works by ranking sort of the
Exactly.
the what would you call it? Not the authority. What's the right word? The seriousness of the website. The
usefulness. I mean, even that I think has had limitations, which is that it is kind of a popularity. First of all, it's gameable, and Google has been in this long run battle with people trying to kind of goose their search results on Google. But if there is low quality information that is popular, that's being linked to by lots of sites, that's being repeated on lots of different sites or platforms, in the Google model, that can rise up and be promoted. In the AI world, that can happen as well, right? Which is, the AI is trained on Wikipedia and published academic articles, but also kind of the full range of news sites, some of which are not very news, and Reddit forums and things like this, right? And so if the information ecosystem has lots of inaccurate information, that can get swept in as well.
Okay, so one of your suggestions is that search engines should just broaden the results. And you said you thought that would happen naturally. There'd be a market for open-minded type search and less open-minded type search, I guess. Do you think they should broaden it as a default, or only when people are searching for, looking specifically to have their minds changed?
Yeah, so certainly I think my co-author and I are the last people to be able to say, like, here's the right balance on this continuum between narrow and broad. I think our recommendations are kind of twofold. One is it would be good for society to have a better understanding that this is kind of one of the parameters that is being determined, being chosen in the development of any information technology. And it's something as a consumer of information technology to kind of consciously evaluate in line with your goals. And then the other is, there's lots of research showing in various ways that just kind of things that have a little more friction don't happen compared to things that you make easier, right? And so our kind of modest proposal is for information providers to think about ways to not make the default of whichever level of narrowness or breadth they've chosen too sticky a default, but instead make it easy for people to switch, which I think would have kind of two effects. One is just the fact that it's easy means it's more likely, but also having the option to choose a broader search is a helpful reminder to the user that, as you said before, there isn't kind of one true set of search results. The set of search results reflects these decisions. An interesting thing about Google is they have this button that I don't think many people use that's like, I'm feeling lucky. Yeah. And what that does is if you type in a search term and click on it, it automatically takes you to the first result, right? And so if you're very confident that what you want is so specific as to be the first website that comes up, you have that flexibility. Our suggestion is, on the other side, there could be another button. Maybe people wouldn't use it very often, but it would still be beneficial to have that says, broaden my results, right? Give me broader results than the way I frame the question might lead you to think I want.
Okay, it's fascinating. So interesting. Thank you very much, Oleg Urminsky, for coming on the Chicago Booth Review podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.